I have actually a question to do with smaller alliances coming up then, because as much as I dislike alliances like High Table and Antarctica for their many flaws, there is actually a chance they will be uh, not normal top 10 alliances, but they could be top 10 alliances. But they're going to be very
Well, I think
strange ones.
High Table's doing a very good job. Antarctica Alliance is harder for me to judge. I know there's a lot of it's like non Discord, non like I'm not sure how much of that alliance is an alliance, so it's kind of hard to judge. The High Table,
Yeah.
I think, is just the High Table is just experiencing what a lot of new alliances that grow from strategy experience, which is their reputation hasn't caught up to their size. But at this point, I would consider High Table to be big enough to be an important player, like a third tier player in the game right now, for sure. I mean,
Yeah, I would
yes,
consider them
they're
third
not
tier
as
as
high
well.
tier.
But my
They're not as
criticism
high
with them
tier.
though,
That's fine. Yeah. Okay.
my
Continue, yeah.
criticism with them isn't that it's mainly that they're kind of like Antarctica, I think, in that they don't really have any agency, I would say. I know Rage, I know he would probably try, but I don't really see a universe where he goes out on his own, essentially, on anything. I think he is
I
very
don't know.
much
I
kind
mean,
of vassalized.
part of agency. This is the problem with the concept of agency in the way that you're presenting it. Part of
Mm.
agency is picking your allies. That's one of the most important parts for a smaller alliance.
Well, he picked
You're not
Antarctica
going to
Alliance.
necessarily, well, they've chosen TGH as their ally, and that seems like a fit that's working for them. It seems like they
Yeah.
have a similar mindset. I mean, I'm only speaking from like being allied to TGH and sort of observing, I guess, how they interact and their mindsets, I guess. So I'm not like an expert on High Table, but my understanding is that they've chosen TGH because they think that TGH is most aligned with their priorities. And so that's a choice. That is agency. If the argument is, well, TGH controls them, which control's always a murky territory to get into when you're talking about like vassal alliances, because there's always an element of back and forth with that I think is we're very reductive
The reason I
when
say
we
it
talk about it
is
that way.
because of this. So I was tempted to put like the Lost Mines, or I still call them MPO, but other people don't do that. Yeah, Nokia's Alliance. I was hesitant to put them in the same category because they, in contrast to Antarctica and High Table, like Antarctica and High Table, essentially just they've grown under TGH's umbrella. Right? That's where they've spent
Yeah.
most of their time. Whereas Nokia's Alliance, they are actually, as much as it really frustrates me, they are a legitimate political actor and a somewhat independent one. Like if I, for example, have a dispute with High Table, I don't have a dispute with High Table. I have a dispute with TGH. If I have a dispute
Yeah.
with the Lost Mines will actually act against me.
The thing is, I don't think that's in their favor. I think that's against their favor. Like my perception of the Lost Mines is they're an alliance that could be a bigger thing, but they have kind of chosen to relegate themselves to be micro, and they've
Yeah.
just played in the micro politics pool. They'd rather be the big dog, the big shark in the pond than to join the real real game.
Yeah,
Like, if however
big
you
fish
want
in
to
a
frame
small
it.
pond rather than a small fish
And
in a big pond. Yeah.
yes, exactly, and that has worked for them, I guess, because people don't care about them. But the truth is, if TLM ever got to a point where they looked like they were a significant, like they became a top 10 alliance, I think they'd get trashed. People would target them. Because then they look like a meal. They look like, oh, that's an alliance I can roll for fun, like that's like the entree, that's a side dish,
Yeah.
That's how they would be treated, I think. Right now, no one looks at them like they're a threat. The decision to get in on TTR's war was an interesting one. It's a good one if it pays off and they can build from that. But I don't know. Like we get along pretty well with Nokia. I think all things considered. Not like my co-leader Trip. He's pretty close with Nokia. Like I could conceive a world where we would sign an alliance like TLM. But it's like, would they be willing to step up and play that game? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know if they would. I don't know if that's where their priorities are. And if it's
Yeah,
not, well, then there wouldn't be any point to doing it. You know
I
what I
have a
mean?
weird relationship with them. A weird relationship with most of these alliances. I have a healthy respect for TLM/MPO. I respect them as an adversary. I've worked together with them on various issues. If, for example, they magically became like a major alliance today, I think they would actually look very much like us in a lot of ways and how they approach things, and sort of pursue their own interests. Whereas I think something like High Table, I think would essentially become a weebinism. Um,
Well,
but
I think where I
yeah,
push back on the idea of pursuing your own interests is it, surviving to me isn't an interest. Surviving is just a thing you do. Um, to me, an interest would, if to me, pursuing your own interests means finding the people that you have issues with and pursuing a war against them, creating
yeah,
some sort of drama in the game. That is pursuing interest to me. Just existing and sort of surviving. That's a phase that I
I
think
agree. Yeah.
alliances need to grow out of personally,
I think it's a
or they
matter of
don't.
power. I think it's kind of like if you care about the environment,
Yeah,
for instance, if you don't tend to care about the environment if you're very poor. But once you become slightly wealthier, of course you do. I think it's the same
yeah.
with alliances, is that they prioritize survival. They don't care about the spheres. They don't care about the big wars. And then as they gain more power, as they become more wealthy, then they care about them more. And I think with TLM, they have reached a point now where they actually can care about those things, and they do care a little bit about them. And if they gained more wealth, they would care even more. Whereas I think some of the other alliances that are at about the same level don't care and won't care. Um,
I I'm not sure. I think TLM enjoys. I don't think it's just that. I mean,
mm,
I will push back against the analogy in a second, but specifically for TLM, I think they just enjoy being the king of the micros. Is what I think it is.
ah,
I
okay.
think. I don't. I could be wrong. Like I'm not a fucking. I'm not in the heads or anything, but
Yeah.
they seem to enjoy. The thing you'll notice about people who want to level up and really want to join the real game, they're not running around trying to get into fights with micros. They're actively trying to avoid it. They don't want that sort of
Mm,
heat because it doesn't look good. Um, but TLM historically, this with Nokia, I'm not following them as much these days, to be fair. So it could be that this is an outdated perspective. They seem to lean into it and enjoy it, and
mm,
if as long as they continue to do that, they're never going to join a bigger, the bigger game, I suppose. But to push back on your analogy a little bit, the only problem with what you're saying is many of the bigger alliances also prioritize and focus on survival, and they aren't. Like TI is an example I use. TI
mm,
has spent the one time TI became a political actor, they did it on behalf of someone else, and it's like they had an incentive to go after Aurora and people who wanted to go after Aurora at the same time, us, obviously, in that case. But there are, like, again, they had other people they could have gone after as well. And then instead, they signed on to the Eclipse stuff. And, like, they had no reason to go after Eclipse, really. Now, you can make the sort of the big dog argument, the argument that, like, Eclipse is the biggest in the game,
mm,
so you need to target them because they're the biggest. Sure, but that's an argument I think that doesn't hold water for your own personal strategic objectives. And it just didn't make any sense. That is the sort of thing that you do if you don't have any enemies. But they had an enemy, which was Aurora. And so they couldn't afford to do that. And it in the end, it bit them in the ass because EVH came around and just rolled the shit out of them. They were thrown
mm.
off by Odoo after helping them try to get Eclipse. And then EVH came in and whacked them. And EVH was always going to hit them eventually, in my opinion, because EVH wanted to, because of their history with Midgard and other things. So it was a blunder on their part, in my opinion.
What do you make of TI now? I'm not entirely sure what to make them, to be honest. I saw them sign Eclipse and cancel with TFP, and I thought that was to some degree a regression. Like they could have tried to form their own sphere with TFP. Um,
Yeah, it's hard to say because I don't know that like I don't know where their Eclipse treaty is going to lead. I'm of the opinion that TI is an alliance on its last legs, and it needs a resurgence. And the issue is Eclipse. Signing Eclipse will be good if Eclipse continues to win, which is, I mean, if you're using historical basis, sure, but you never know. Eclipse could lose. We could get rolled. You can never fully bet on these things, but them going to Eclipse gives them space to grow, sure. But what we saw is they had a year of growth where they didn't fight anyone, where they stayed out of politics, and as soon as they re-entered politics, they collapsed. And so, in my opinion, honestly, I don't think that this actually changes their outcome very much. It'll allow them maybe to survive, but I don't know that they're going to thrive because what they lack is talent. They need key people to come in and just fix their shit.
They've
And
tried that a
the
few times.
the issue is they pick bad people. Like
Yeah.
Kev is an old friend of mine. I don't like to shit on him, but he is not an administrative type. He's not the guy who you bring in to fix an alliance. Kev's an FA guy. He's a
Mm.
community guy. Someone who's good at building communities, keeping people together. He's good at hyping people. But when you have an alliance of people who are dead, you need someone who's going to come in and just go, okay, this is all the fluff that goes. This is all the good people. They grow. This is what we need to do. We need to do this, this, and this. You need an overhaul of the alliance. You need it to be fixed. TI
Yeah.
keeps picking people who can't do that. Like Alexia again. I like Alexia. I'm friendly
I
with
was
him.
gonna say, yeah.
He may he
He's
may
great
disagree with
diplomatically,
me,
but
but I don't think he's a particularly skilled administrator. And I'm going to point to his record with other alliances to
mm,
make the case that he's not the guy to come in and fix an alliance like TI. They need someone who's a huge internals person to be able to fix an alliance like that. And from what I've seen, the other issue is again, I like Tyrion, but my estimation of him is he's not good at picking talent. He's not good at
mm.
actually spotting the correct people to do the job for him. There were like I don't know if it's true, but I heard rumors that he was looking at merging Mayhem in, and that Mayhem was going to run
That
his
seems like a
alliance.
mistake.
Yeah, yeah. Mayhem doesn't run their own alliance, and it's like 20 people. So how are they going to
Yeah.
handle 100 people? It's like you can't. That's not. If you're the people you're looking at are Alexia, who again is good at a specific thing, and that the issue is Tyrion's not even bad at FA. So like they already have an FA guy, which is Tyrion.
Uh,
Tyrion can do the FA. He's made
I
mistakes,
don't
but
know about that. I know that I was going to say earlier, I concur with you about Alexio. He's not an administrator. However, he is amazing at FA, I would say, even though I've had many disagreements with him over the years.
he's good.
He,
He's good. Yeah,
yeah,
he knows how to maneuver around the game. He has connections. He's old
yeah.
in the game, so he has people he
I
talks to.
I don't know
So
to how
he's a
much,
good
to what
person.
extent though Tyrion is actually listening to him. I think Tyrion sort of does have his
Or
own
he's.
path, and I would say
I
if
don't
I
know
was
if
in
he's.
Tyrion's shoes right
Yeah,
now, if I was in Tyrion's shoes right now, I would say Alexio do the FA. I'm going to deal with everything else. And I think
yeah.
if they're both
Well,
stuck doing FA, like that's
the issue is
a
I
lot of
don't know
wasted
that
time.
Tyrion wants. I assume Tyrion doesn't want to do everything else because otherwise, I assume he would have
Yeah.
stepped up and done it already. I don't know Tyrion's background, but I'm assuming he doesn't have that skill either. Otherwise, it would have been done. Again, someone needs to step into that alliance and just sort their shit out. But the other problem is, and I've spoken to Tyrion about this personally because I was curious when things were going bad, like what steps are being taken to actually
Mm.
address these issues. And the impression I got was that it's like a community thing. They're a community alliance. They have this group of people. And so they're not willing to make the sort of hard decisions that they need to make to fix that alliance, which
Uh,
would be trimming down. The issue is it's all well and good to be a top 8 alliance, but if you're not actually a top 8 alliance, you don't have any actual like strength, and a lot of that is just fluff, then what are you going to do? Now, there are counter arguments to that. I mean, they have good let's attendance. TI does, which is something that people don't, I think, realize. I didn't realize it either. It was Abaddon who told me this, showed me all the stats. I was like, oh, okay. So that's a starting point, but it says more about your alliance, I think, how you handle losing than how you handle winning. It says more about the fire in your alliance and how quickly you fall apart when you start to lose. And TI collapse pretty fast, so it's not good for them. I just don't know. I think that this eclipse thing is probably going to mean that they stay on life support for longer than they would have. But politically, I don't know what it gets them. TFP,
They
yeah,
could have
I
actually
mean, with
learned a thing
TFP,
from TFP and how to
well, TFP
recover.
has done a good job, I think.
Mm.
TFP also has a talent shortage, but they have Schwinn. He's great, and Schwinn is the type of guy that TI needs. Problem is, like, I mean, TI is at a point where I don't know they can be recovered without like an influx of people or like a merger. So it's I just don't know what happens with them. We'll see. It's good. Maybe they'll just I always like people to prove me wrong because it's better for the game in general if that happens. So look, if they pull their shit together and actually turn it around, I'll be very happy. But
Are there
and
any other
I'm happy to.
alliances that you think though that have the potential to, I guess, not supplant TI, but to also sort of hit like a real like major or semi-major alliance? Like I can only really think of
Um,
NATO and WAP right now.
uh,
Um,
not going to be Gato,
mm,
because respectfully, their FA is they don't do a lot of FA as far as I can tell. They have the democracy thing going for them. Gato could become an alliance if they found that that one guy who comes in, the Schwinn or the Harry
I
or
think they
the guy who
have.
comes in.
So the reason I would actually consider them there now is because of Mindson, who like
I
has many
like
flaws,
Minson, but
but
they need an F. You need the guy who's the FA guy. I mean, Minson isn't gonna be the guy to like lead them to like supremacy. I'm be honest. Um, he's
I
a
don't
guy
know.
who play the game in a supporting role, but I don't know. I've seen him make too many mistakes and do too many silly things for me to believe that he can become like a serious figure. But he can prove me wrong. That'd be
Yeah,
nice to see.
it's one
I
of those
just don't
things
think
where
Gato's it. No.
okay,
I mean,
fair
I
enough.
think you have a better chance personally than Gato does to get into that. I mean, you're the closest right now. I mean, there's a gap between you and everyone else. You're like the only alliance that's in that gap right now. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, logically, if I were to say there was going to be another major alliance, I would say it'll come from merger.
Mm, makes
I
sense.
think if we're looking at alliances that make sense, WAP WAP is one, DB is another one.
Mm,
Um, KT, I guess, in the sense that they aren't a top 8 major. They could, if they picked up some people, become a serious player. But I don't think they will if they continue playing the sort of block strategy. So I don't know. It's hard to say.
mm.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have the unpopular opinion maybe that I think TFP is a major. Some people don't think that. I don't really understand why. TFP
Yeah,
is
that's weird take.
on par with TKR in my opinion right now. With some pushing.
I don't know
Um,
about TKR, but I would definitely put them above TI and like close to TKR. I think the raw
well,
city count is what they're lacking.
the thing is they've caught up to TKR. You actually compare tiering,
Yeah,
TFP
on
has
tiering, yeah.
come come close to TKR. I mean, in the past year or so, like we overtook TKR in key areas. They've got a couple like above 40s, but we're ahead in terms of how many 40s we have in total. Um, and TFP's caught up to them, and we overtook over TFP in the same
Actually, I have a
stretch. But
question then. Do
TFP's
you consider TI a major?
no, I did until they got rolled. Now I don't.
Okay. Yeah. So that was sort of something
TI,
I thought on yesterday. They have no upper tier. Like they're City 35s and below.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't think you need an upper tier to be a major. Again, it depends on how you're looking at the term major, because there's some people who would argue there's only two majors in the game, right? Which is
Hmm.
Rose and Eclipse. I don't really subscribe to that because I think that we're still like if the death of the mid tier is finalized, as I would call it, that's probably
Hmm.
true because then those alliances become the new macros. Right now, I don't think we're there, and so no, I consider the top 7 to all effectively be majors. And a major is defined, I think, by their ability to lead a sphere as well, and all of those alliances can lead a sphere. So yeah, with TI, it was a matter of TI had potential. That was coming
Hmm.
into those wars. That was they hadn't fought for a year. No one really knew. We had history to point us to clues. We didn't really know for sure. And then we watched them collapse. And now it's like I don't think anybody can argue that TI is a major um, for that reason. For the reason that
Hmm.
it's obvious that they're more bloated than most alliances are in the top 7. Top 7 alliances, they have bloat. Every alliance has bloat, but it's a lot less than what TI has. TI has more bloat than member, in my opinion.
What do you think I don't know, not necessarily us, but what do you think some of these smaller alliances should be doing? Like, should they be trying to join some of these major spheres and sort of sit under the umbrella of protection? Should they be trying to like sit it out,
Um,
I guess, and try to catch up? Um,
Yeah, I don't see. It's questionable because it depends on what way you're tackling it. The issue is
hmm.
getting it out and growing is good, but it only gives you advantage over the alliances that are losing. It doesn't give you an advantage over the alliances that are winning. A winning major is growing faster than an alliance that sits out of
Hmm.
conflicts. I think when you join conflicts, you're gaining other things rather than growth. You're gaining relationships, connections, things that you can use. You're earning the respect of alliances.
Hmm.
But again, if your alliance isn't good, you should be focused on your internals and not on FA. Is really the bottom line. If your
Hmm.
alliance needs work, focus on fixing your alliance. Do not try and make big sweeping FA moves. Take the safer approach. That's probably the best thing. But actually fix your alliance. If you're not going to fix your alliance, then fucking what's your just
Yeah.
disband, just merge
So
like that.
what would you do in say UPN's position? Because they are kind of like they're a sort of a good example of this, where they're not super great internally, but I don't think they can really improve internally by themselves. I think they like
Well, I don't
yeah.
think that's well. Yes and no. Look, everyone can improve if they try, but a lot of
Mm.
alliances don't try. And if you don't think you have the skills to do it, you need to look for people. You The
Mm.
reality is, what you probably need to do is you need to give over some of your sovereignty and your agency in exchange for help, because you can
Mm.
always take that back later. That's the reality. There are a lot of people who are good at the game who I think would happily help alliances fix their shit and make those decisions for them and help them with that in exchange for their military support. I think that's true across the game. I think the issue is a lot of these alliances are pig-headed and arrogant, but not necessarily UPN, but just as a general example. They have a set way of playing and they're happy with it and they don't really want to change it. And so nothing happens. But yeah, I mean,
Okay.
with the case of, well, the best example of this is actually DB. If you want an
Mm.
example of an alliance that emulates what I'm talking about, DB has had multiple people come through
Mm.
to varying degrees of success. I would say the ones that were actually successful were myself and Toxic. When I went in, I improved their econ. I made them an actual player in the game, like they were the one of the founding members of a major sphere. When I was in DB, we were effectively leading the sphere, and then I left for reasons that I'm not going to get into.
Mm.
And TP went there. I think he's done a good job of keeping that relevance alive and improving them. I think I'm happy you brought up this topic because I want to talk about DB a little bit. One of
Mm.
the people who I don't think gets nearly enough credit for DB's success is Super Dead, their MA head. He's
Mm.
great. He's one of the better MA heads in the game. He is good enough that if he wasn't so loyal, he could be an MA head for a major alliance. I
Mm.
think he's better than most of the MA heads of major alliances. And I think I give him more credit than myself or Toxic for turning that alliance around in the area where it needed it the most, which was MA. He's turned it into a much better, because people
Wow.
people don't recognize that DB's been fighting well for a while now. Before even I went there. Their first good performance, I think, at least that I saw, because I wasn't around before that, was the Midgard War, Bifrost Blitz. They did really well in that. It wasn't like, oh my god, an amazing, ground shattering performance, but compared to where they were, they did really well. And then obviously they did great in all the other wars that they've fought in since, and I credit him for that. And I think but again, from the FA perspective, by letting these people come into their alliance and help navigate their FA, there's a kind of quid pro quo there, in that those people who come in gain something from it. They gain an advantage. They get another alliance with numbers. They get to do things with that alliance, but in turn, they get the reward of skilled players who are able to help them. The reality is now, if Toxic decided to leave and go somewhere else, the
Mm.
impacts of his work there, in the same way the impacts of my work there, would still hold, and they would be able to build off that. So there's an argument to be made that some of these smaller alliances should be looking for talent to literally lead, essentially. But that requires eating a humble pie that most people are not willing to
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
is the truth.
It's a trade-off. Hmm. That's it might be a really good place to end it, I think, because unless you have any
I,
other
I
topics you
will
want to.
I will just add to it, but yeah, we can
Mm.
end it after this. But yeah, that's not the only piece of advice I can give to smaller alliances. So um,
Yeah. You have
you
the floor.
need well, okay, so we tried to do the thing that I think that they should have done. It's probably too late to do it now. We tried to make a lower tier sphere with CIS, right? And
Mm.
CIS was something that would have worked if we had gained more alliances, if more alliances that were smaller were willing to make moves, like not smaller in terms of like size, but in terms of tiering. Because the truth is, the Midgard strategy was a good strategy, which is you stack a bunch of
Mm.
lower tier alliances together, and it gives them control over a tier, and they can push up, and they become dangerous. This is why Midgard was able to beat TKR despite being considerably lower in tiering. That's a
Mm.
good strategy. And the issue that these alliances get into is they're always attaching themselves to mages, and then the mages basically fight each other, and then you're the biggest loser. I mean, we recognize this
Mm.
as Sing when we were low tier. We're not low tier anymore. We've grown,
Yeah.
but we wanted to make a lower tier block then because we recognized that, like, we were fighting if you had like Aurora and CTO, and they were on the same tiering as us, while all the other alliances were growing above us. And you know, same with TI, with all these other alliances. Like, it's a good
Lower
strategy.
tier
The issue,
The
yeah,
lower tier
sorry,
blocks are brilliant in the sense that I agree with you that when you're fighting in the major global wars, you just lose a ton of money, right? And the big alliances really don't care about you. They don't even give you rebuild or war chests like they used to. Like they used to give things to smaller alliances. Now they don't.
yeah,
The problem though with organizing lower tier blocks is there's been a few of them like Seoul and FSO or whatever. The problem with them is that the smaller alliances, they just lack the basic communication skills and they lack any sort of
yeah.
vision. So they
Well, it's
they
skill issue.
can't really cooperate. Yeah. It's a skill issue, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. This is the thing. There's only so much you can do. If you have a skill issue, there's no advice I can give you. You just need to get better.
I,
Like,
I think
you need to.
the solution is creating a
Yeah,
server with all of the small alliances and just allowing them to talk. I think it would promote so much cooperation between them, even across spheres. Um, but
I'll
it's
tell you
so
what I
difficult to
think would
do.
happen. That would become a proxy battlefield for major alliances. Is I think what would happen. I
Mm.
don't think you can just collect all of them together. I think you have to make a sphere from them. I think that's the only way you can do it. Like, this is why we tried to do it. We were trying to rally the small alliances to fight other majors with, because we figured, these guys have more in common with us pragmatically than they do with them, because we're all the ones that lose every time these conflicts happen where they're fighting each other and we're not involved. But no one wanted to do it, and that's ultimately what these alliances are loyal to a specific major, and they just sort of tend to stick with
Mm,
that major. Penta was a fantastic idea. It was too small. I think Penta right now is actually the best possible thing that Penta could be doing. They're doing it, which is they're
mm,
staying together, but they're going to one big major. That
yeah.
is the best thing they could do. Even if they lose, that's still better for them because they're together. They grow together. Their effects of they can grow and they can bolster that tier to where it minimizes damage for them. So
And
it's
they
the
can
best strategy.
unionize against the Rose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, as much as it is needed for them to do that sort of thing, yeah, that's exactly it. Like, I think smaller alliances need to work at the very least. This is actually the advice I would give. This is probably the easiest thing they could do. Find a partner, find another alliance that is your size, and work together. This is what TSC and WAP seem to be doing, and that is the right choice because together you're stronger than you are separate. You have more leverage if you're two alliances that added together are the sides of an even bigger alliance than if you're just one. So finding a partner that you can trust and work with is a good plan. And then I would say you take that partnership and you walk it to a major and you work together in that sense because I don't think low tier block can work right now with how big the gap has gotten. It would have worked a year ago. I don't know if it's going to work now. Too few options. You would need almost all of them to get together for it to work.
Mm,
But again, I'm thinking about alliances that are already somewhat established. I'm thinking about like
yeah.
Camelot, High Table, House Stark, like DB Hangoffs, all these alliances. I'm not thinking about like tiny alliances like how big's FSO? Very big. They're like
Yeah, they're on
mid
the periphery there.
20s. They're not what I would think in this. I think FSO's best choice is to merge into someone. That's what I think my advice for an alliance or FSO would be.
Mm,
Because they'll just grow
that,
faster if they join someone. That
yeah.
is a reality.
I mean, I'm probably going to take that advice. That is brilliant advice. I had not heard that before. That's very good. Um, um, there's, yeah, actually, it kind of works. I would say it works very far down, even for like upcoming alliance. But yeah, not FSO, not alliances that have sort of a fundamental flaw, or they've had many
Yeah.
opportunities and can't make it work.
Oh, they're just too small. Like, 'cause
Yeah,
the thing is, you can add 5 alliances together of FASO size, and no major is going to look at that and go, "Oh, okay, now
with
we're
those
talking." Like,
partnerships as
no,
well, those can lead into mergers. Like if you
yeah,
have two top 50 alliances partner with each other, they can work together to a point, and then it might be they need to merge together to hit top 30, find a new partner,
yeah,
do the same.
exactly. Well,
Um,
yeah, I mean, the thing is, with the smaller alliances, any alliance that is a micro and it says something on their page like, "Oh, we won't accept mergers" or anything like that, that's a red flag. That means you're an
yeah,
idiot. You should always be like, the issue is that all these people are like insane all the time.
yeah.
Like a lot of the micro leaders are just insane people. So it's a bunch of insane people joining together, and then they collapse. Like you see it all the time. They'll merge together, and then in like a week they'll collapse because they're all people who don't know how to communicate with each other. And the reality is, none of those people will ever be successful. So that's just the reality. There's a limit to how much you can do before it just becomes a skill issue. Like an Alan is never going to be a major alliance leader because he just
Yeah.
isn't the type of person who can be a major alliance leader. He lacks the necessary personality traits to do it.
I'm going to disagree here. Actually, yeah, this is probably our biggest disagreement. So I had your opinion for the longest time, and I've been proven wrong on 3 occasions. I just don't have the same opinion anymore. Number
Well,
one
we're the three
is
occasions.
number one is Nokia. He
Or
objectively, by every metric, he should have failed. His entire
I
alliance is
would
insane,
argue he
people.
hasn't. I would argue he has yet to succeed, which does establish a point. Like there have been
He's on the
micros that
precipice.
have grown. I don't think he's even no. I don't think he's on the precipice. I think he's on the precipice of starting an FA career if he wants to. I don't think he's on the precipice
Okay.
of success. I think he's wading into the pools of
Number two,
being an FA
actually,
person.
number two is Alan, and that I think he actually did build a number of big alliances. I think Black Skies hit top 30 quite a
Yeah, and
number
they
of
all
times.
collapsed. So
They
that's
did,
kind of
but
my
through
point.
external pressure. He kept messing around in micro business and got blown up. But he
Yes,
got
exactly, because
close.
he's a micro leader. That's my point.
Um,
Yeah, like this is the
number
thing. You will see micros that. Sorry,
yeah.
we will see
Number
micros that
three
rise
is
up above the pile. Yeah,
all good, all good.
number
Sorry.
three.
No, you're right. Actually, finish. Yeah, you're right about micros reaching the top of the pile and then they inevitably crash back down. But number three is high table. So high table, if you don't know how it was formed, Camelot had a block called I forget what. Oh, Merlin Accords, if you remember that. But basically, we signed all the small alliances because when we were fighting with MPO/TLM, they were recruiting small alliances to hit us. And so we signed them all and we gave them MDPs, which they found really strange. But the condition was basically we're not really interested in defending you, but we will to some extent, and you don't fight us. And Rage, who was in our IA department, said, I want to join FA and I want to try and unite some of these things into another major alliance so it can be allied to Camelot. And at the time, I said, well, that's not going to work, right? These people are, for lack of a better term, these people are all nuts. Like,
Yeah, well,
like,
I'm actually going to give you the answer to why that's different. And the difference is if I'm taking your example, because I don't know the history, but if I'm taking your
okay.
example face value, then the difference is Rage. It's not that a bunch of
Yeah,
micro leaders came together. It's that one guy from outside banded them all together into
exactly.
an actual alliance, which that has happened before. I mean, TI, as bad as an example as that is now, there was a time when TI was a good alliance. TI is an interesting one because TI one of the luckiest alliances in the game's history in the sense that they came up during the rise of IQ and they basically recruited like 80% of the members that came into the game while everyone was fighting each other. So they're a very unique circumstance. But they also had Tyrion, who, despite his current flaws, I think he had a good run in the start and had people back then. And yeah, it's a major that has then declined after. So it is possible, but it's always because there's the guy who comes in and he's the guy who fixes the shit and he's the guy who's competent enough to do it. So using your example, I would imagine that Rage is the guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've gotten into any micro dramas or anything. I don't follow them that closely, to be honest.
They do. But I think the problem or the difference here is that I think Nokia will be able to hand things off to a successor. I think Rage will probably be able to hand things off to a successor. And I think the main problem with uniting the micros is that initial period of instability. And in a lot of cases, if a pure personality, a pure like leader can calm that chaos and build something from it.
Well, it's not just calming the chaos. The reality is when you're uniting a micro, you're not uniting a micro. You're uniting the members of micros.
Mm.
Probably in the process of doing that, you're getting rid of the micro leaders that are holding them back and basically just taking their members and they're good people. Because the sad truth of micros is there are probably good players in those micros that if they were taught better in a better alliance, they would have gone on to be better players. But they're held back by idiots who run the alliances who are either children or act like children. And as a result, you get these like insane people with like hundreds of different complexes running around fighting each other, and then the alliances just die. That's pretty much the issue. So uniting the micros is never uniting the micros. It's stealing the members of micros to make an alliance. Because micro members are just recruits like any other alliance. If you go to any major, you'll find a bunch of derpy people, but they're in the spot they should be, which is member. Right?
Yeah. Okay, that's good compromise on a few different points. I think we've imparted some good advice.
Yeah, man, I hope so. It's been a fun exchange. I'm losing my voice from how long it's been going.
Sorry about that then.
It's fine. We'll drink some water or something.
Yep. All right then, I'll try and convert this into something. Thank you very much for your time.
No problem.
Cool. See you around.